holiday season approaches, we're all in the mood for a little bit of retail therapy. And if your player characters are feeling the same way, perhaps you'll want to have them go on a shopping trip to buy some new magical items.
So if your table's ready for a holiday shopping spree, then look no further than this week's sponsor, The Seeker's Guide to Enchanting Emporiums, which is now live on Kickstarter.
It features over 15 new fantasy shopkeepers ready to drop into any fantasy campaign, an eclectic mix of new magic items, over 100, with lots of quirks, fun quests, and new interesting loot for your player characters to discover and buy.
Not only that, but the emporiums in this book are being created by some of our really good friends, including one by us, which is right out of the pages of Drakkenheim, our favorite lovable shopkeeper.
Yes, an unlocked stretch goal for the project is our classic fantasy merchant, Aldor the Immense, is bringing his presence to the enchanting emporiums. So that stretch goal has already been unlocked, in addition to amazing shops by our friends Ginny D, Ben Byrne, James Hake, and many, many more.
So if you're as excited as we are for holiday shopping and getting your hands on some brand new loot and magic items, then make sure to check the links below to get in on the Kickstarter while it's available. And now, on to this week's episode. We are finally finishing off our first level spell tier ranking today.
My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Today, we're going to look at some of my favorite spells in 5th edition, spells that I love using at low levels of play and that are very useful into the higher levels. If you thought that Shield was going to be the most hotly debated one from the first part, you're really in for it.
There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
As always, up on screen right now, you're going to see our criteria for how we tier rank the spells. In short, an S-tier spell is an absolute must-have. It is so good, it is worth multi-classing or taking a feat to grab this spell if you can.
A-tier is an excellent choice if you have the spell available to you and should be deeply considered. Meanwhile, B-tier, your mileage may vary. Some campaigns this could be a really excellent choice, whereas others, it might not be very useful.
A B-tier spell also simply might be replaced by a better higher level spell later on. Whereas a C-tier spell is really niche. It's good for the one thing that it's supposed to do, or it is really good in a very specific set of circumstances, but another spell probably does better in a more wider range of scenarios.
And lastly, D tier is spells that you probably want to avoid. These might be traps or spells that just are not worth taking because other spells of the same level will outperform it in 100% of circumstances.
We begin with Silent Image, one of my favorite illusion spells for bards, sorcerers, and wizards. It has a casting time of 1 action, and then when you have it in play, you do have to concentrate on it. It has a duration of up to 10 minutes. When you cast the spell, you get to create an image of an object, creature, or something that you can imagine that is no larger than a 15-foot cube. The silent image is purely visual. There is no sound, there is no smell, there is no other sensory effect. You can use your action to cause the image to move within range, and as the image changes location, you can alter its appearance so that it appears natural for the image. So for example, you could make it look like a creature is like scurrying across the room or something like that. Any physical interaction with the image instantly reveals it to be an illusion because things pass through it, and a creature that uses its action to examine the image can determine that it's such with an investigation check against your spell save DC. Once a creature knows that it's an illusion, they can see through it, but until they know that, it is basically opaque to them.
That's a lot of information for a spell, but a lot of shenanigans can happen with this spell. I think that Silent Image is an excellent illusion spell. It's one that can be foiled quite easily, though, if somebody interacts with it. And because it doesn't create a smell or sound, you need to be crafty with how you use it. That's not a major negative, though, because I think most illusion spells in the hands of a crafty player can be really, really powerful. And I think this one actually stands out as a very powerful spell for a crafty player because the ability to move the image around and make it appear natural can get you away with quite a bit.
I think that the thing that I love about Silent Image is that it works so well in a very low key sort of way. One of my favorite techniques for Silent Image is to make an illusion of a wall over a door or even a fake wall in a room that me and my allies then stand behind. And when you make silent images that resemble things like walls or foliage or an immobile object, it doesn't necessarily click off to people that are observing it that it's not real because it's meant to be stationary, right? And so if you have something that looks like it's blending in with the rest of the environment, that it's not going to prompt creatures to investigate it.
You know, it's one of those things that you come to a dead end in a hallway, and it takes you a second to decide to actually push up against the wall to find out it's an illusion. And I think actually the text for this spell isn't misleading in the fact that it says anything incorrect, but it very much focuses on the rules and interactions for making it appear as a creature, which immediately makes your brain think of how can I use this to mimic creatures. But you just brought up a great point that that's actually straying away from the most powerful uses of this spell, because no, you can't make it make a sound or a smell, but walls don't generally make sounds or have smells that are very distinct. So by using Silent Image to mask things, if you are trying to escape a dungeon, although I guess if you're trying to escape a dungeon, then the question becomes, would the inhabitants of that dungeon know that there was a door there?
They probably would, so you have to be careful with that. But they might not realize that the 15-foot wide room is now only 14 feet wide, because you've put a fake wall across the wall that you and your allies are hiding behind.
So you're just pressed up against the wall while they're investigating the room, and there's a fake wall in front of you. That's, it's one of those things that if I walked into a room in my house and one of the walls was just like a foot, I'd probably be like, this feels weird.
But if it's not a room that you're in all the time, or if you're just casually glancing in the room and it otherwise looks normal and undisturbed, or like maybe you stole something and you just leave a silent image of the thing that you stole behind.
I do think that this is one of those spells that, again, in the hands of the right players, is going to be really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Right now, and I kind of feel like I could be easily talked up, but I'm sitting at a B.
Okay. I agree with a B ranking. I think that's an honest ranking because some DMs will just never let illusions work. I remember playing in a campaign years ago. This was in 3rd edition, where I was playing a Beguiler wizard, Beguiler, which was a 3rd edition class that was focused on entirely on illusions. And I might as well have not been in that campaign because the DM never let any of the illusions work at all. There's going to be some DMs who are going to be completely on board with it and are... So this is like B because it depends on your DM.
It also depends on you as a crafty player.
Yeah.
I find that illusions are very nebulous in their execution, and some players are like, I mean, if you don't think of the examples, you're like, I'm going to make an illusion of myself standing in the room. And then once the people in the room try to talk to it, and they're like, wait, it's not here. And you're like, drats, that didn't work. And a lot of players will steer themselves to not using these to the most effective use. And that's not to say that it's still not useful. It's just that you can get really, really creative with illusion magic in this game, and that depends on the player's creativity and the DM's interpretation of that creativity. So there's a lot of play with illusion spells that are determined by the interaction between both the player playing it and the DM's interpretation of it.
Yeah, and I think in the right campaign with the right player, it is absolutely S tier. I think that in some cases, illusion spells, particularly Silent Image, just end up being like trash because the DM never lets it work.
Next up, we come to Silvery Barbs, a controversial divination spell for bards, sorcerers, and wizards. It has a casting time of 1 reaction, which is triggered when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself succeeds on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. When you trigger the spell, you magically distract the creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The triggering creature must re-roll a d20 and use the lower roll. You then get to choose a different creature you can see within range, including yourself. The chosen creature has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute. The creature can be empowered by only one use of the spell at a time.
So Silvery Barbs is unequivocally, in my opinion, one of the most powerful spells in the game.
I agree.
And I do think that it is S tier.
I agree with that as well, yeah.
Why?
So Silvery Barbs is kind of like the Lucky Feet, but dialed up at the cost of a spell slot. So a first level spell slot allows you to take a situation where the dice rolls have not worked in your favor, whether that is the saving throw against another spell that you have cast, or an ability check that you needed the enemy to fail, or an attack roll that is about to kill one of your teammates. You get to shift the fates slightly.
It can negate a crit.
It can negate a crit.
Yeah.
So your fighter or barbarian is at like 10 hit points and gets crit, and you can just say, no, roll that again. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal at the table. I think that controlling the dice rolls at the table to an extent. Dice rolls the dice gods are fickle.
Yes, they are.
And even sometimes when you try to control it, it doesn't necessarily work in your favor, but rolling twice instead of once is twice as good.
I think that we've seen in a lot of our campaigns, because you use the Lucky Feet, and we've joked so many times about how that second roll doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
But when it does, it's such a reversal. And I think that's where you really see the biggest impacts, I think, of Silvery Barbs are when you use it to negate a foe that scored a critical hit.
Yeah.
And when you use it against an enemy who has succeeded a saving throw against a hard battlefield control effect. And I think that if you only use Silvery Barbs in those two instances, it is absolutely singing. Because that's what I would not use Silvery Barbs to turn a hit into a miss unless that was going to save someone's life.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would necessarily use Silvery Barbs. You can use it against ability checks, which means you can use it against a successful ability check to investigate an illusion, which is kind of weird. You can use it but if you just look out for those two circumstances, the crits and like the wizard has cast Hold Monster, the monster succeeded their save, and now you as the bard cast Silvery Barbs on the monster, so they have to re-roll their save. Potentially now the wizard, that they would have wasted their spell slot, their 5th level spell slot, for your 1st level spell slot, you saved that 5th level slot.
I'm also thinking of like weird interactions, like my rogue has an ability, Panache, that requires me to make one skill check while the enemy makes a different skill check opposing me. And could the bard then be like, roll that skill check again because you rolled too high and I want...
It like, very well could be like there's a bunch of interesting ways, or maybe like just the DM had the monster make an athletics check to jump somewhere and them failing. Or another one that actually it would be really good for, the enemy wizard is concentrating on a spell and they make their concentration check, and Silvery Barbs just makes them roll another time and break. So there's a whole bunch of like different really tricky uses of it, and I think that they're all really, really strong. Yeah.
Now, I do want to play a little bit of devil's advocate, but I want to say before I jump into being devil's advocate, I'm giving this spell S tier, and I think it is in the upper echelon of spells, and you should go out of your way to get Silvery Barbs if your DM's allowing it. And that's actually what I want to talk about. When this spell was first released, there was a lot of people saying, I will never allow this spell in my games. We've allowed it in both of our games. We both have characters that have taken it. And it does require them using a spell slot and rolling the dice again. Two things that happen here. A spell slot is a resource cost. A first level spell slot is a small resource cost. So I don't want to overplay how much of a resource cost this is, but I don't want to underplay it either. You have to decide to use a spell slot to cast this, and you're rolling the dice again. I, having been somebody who has rolled 100 lucky rolls and had it like 50% of the time not help me, all I'm saying is if you're saying this spell should definitely be banned, try it first and see if it breaks your game. Because I feel like it might not. It might actually be absolutely fine at your table. That's all I'm saying. It's still probably like if 100% broken is the threshold in which they shouldn't have even made this spell, I'm putting this at like a 93 to 95%.
I think the other interesting thing about Silvery Barbs is that it does kind of feel like an interesting teamwork spell, because I see it get used a lot in that situation where like the wizard casts a spell and then an ally is casting Silvery Barbs to help them succeed, and that feels good.
Yeah.
And so because the spell has that teamwork element, of course, you could argue that like you can be the halfling divination wizard that takes Silvery Barbs and that takes
if somebody's building a character to abuse Silvery Barbs, like talk to them. But if somebody's just taking it because it's a cool spell and they're going to use it to help their allies, that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it helps you succeed.
Yeah.
And so it pulls success out of the. It's one of those things that it actually, what it's doing to the enemies is it's pulling defeat from the jaws of victory, right? Like it's turning the situation around for the enemies at a very low cost. So it is a very potent spell. I think having now seen it in play, I'm comfortable with the power level that it brings. I don't think I've seen a player that has used it to its absolute hilt. I think it's actually a challenging spell to use well, because I have seen a lot of players that use it to turn a hit into maybe a miss, and I think that that's not a very efficient use of the spell.
I'd use it to let like hold monster land or something.
Yeah, you want to use it for hard control, really, to make hard control land and to negate crits. And it does make, I think the thing with it is that because Silvery Barbs is one of those things that makes hard control stronger, which is already one of those things that is really strong, that's where people get into the weeds with it.
Next up we come to Sleep, an enchantment spell for bards, sorcerers, wizards, Twilight Domain clerics, Oath of Redemption paladins, and the Archfey warlock. It has a casting time of 1 action and lasts 1 minute. This spell sends creatures into a magical slumber. You roll 5d8, and the total equals how many hit points this spell can affect. If you have enough hit points in your pool to equal the amount of hit points that creature has, they fall asleep, and you remove that amount from your pool.
So if you have Sleep and you roll 21 on the dice, and you got a bunch of 5 hit point goblins and a 21 hit point bugbear, puts the 5 goblins to sleep, but the bugbear is still awake.
It starts with the lowest hit point creature, which also means if damage has been dealt, you're much more likely to put those creatures to sleep. In general, I think Sleep is a classic and cool spell. However, I think it's actually quite tricky to use and is only good at low levels.
It drops off hard.
It's almost, for me, and this sucks because I think Sleep's a good spell, it's almost not worth taking because I'm going to swap it out by the time I even get like 2nd or 3rd level spells.
It's one of those spells that when you're playing at level 1 and level 2 and kind of into level 3, when the 5 hit point goblins and the 2 hit point kobolds are still a factor at play, it's amazing because you can knock those creatures out and then you just slit their throats, right? Like they're taken out. The average of 5d8 is 22.5. So it starts to get, once monsters start to get over challenge rating 1 and 2, that's the point when they start having more hit points than that individually. And so this is a great spell for sweeping the minions, for sweeping like the low challenge rating monsters. But fortunately, the mighty hypnotic pattern comes in racing on a chariot of hypnotic snakes to save the day and be the direct upgrade to Sleep.
And once you have access to hypnotic pattern, you're never going to cast Sleep again. I do think there are some like niche cases for sleep, like if you need to sneak past the lowly guards that you're
Yeah.
hoping are just like always low hit points, or you need to like put some people to sleep in a tavern for so that they don't
Or maybe when you just really need a nap yourself.
like cast it on yourself. Or like you could use it in a weird niche combination, like a bunch of these creatures get hit with a high level fireball, and then somebody else casts sleep on the remaining few. But it becomes trickier and trickier to use as your creatures have more and more hit points. And I actually think I want to give sleep a C.
I think a C is a little too low considering how powerful it is at first and second level. I think I'm gonna be very resolute with my B ranking. I think it's a strong spell. I think you could make the argument that it's like an S tier spell. I think that's being way too generous. It does drop off really, really hard. I think at the level you get it at first level play, it's amazing. Absolutely A tier at those levels. I do agree with you that like if you're like a 10th level character, it's absolutely like a C tier spell, which is why I think the B ranking acknowledges that.
I think that might be fair, and my C ranking might be coming from I used this spell once in playing the game, and when I did, there was like a group of like 5 enemies, and I put 2 of them to sleep, and then the other group just awoke them, and then
I definitely felt in Baldur's Gate 3 like enemies would just you'd put someone to sleep and someone else would just come over and kick them.
Yeah,
and it was like, well, okay. So next we got Snare. This is an abjuration spell for druids, rangers, wizards, and artificers. It's a casting time of 1 minute and a duration of 8 hours. It is not a ritual spell. As you cast the spell, you use a rope to create a circle with a 5-foot radius on the ground on the floor. It's a snare trap. You finish casting, the rope disappears, and the circle becomes a magic trap. It's nearly invisible. And it triggers when small, medium, and large creatures moves onto the ground, and they have to make a dexterity saving throw, or just Bugs Bunny style, they get hoisted up into the air and restrained there until the spell ends, which can be 8 hours. The restrained creature can use the dexterity saving throw at the end of each of its turns to try to break out, and other people can try to help them. And after the trap is triggered, it's over once no one else is there to trigger it. So this is a very niche spell, but I'm glad it exists.
Yeah. This is one of those weird cases where like I would take this on my ranger and cast it just to say I did, and like hope that I can like, I don't know, you're being followed by a crafty goblin who's like trying to spy on your camp.
You're looking for a wascally wabbit.
Yeah, you got a Haragon spy.
Yeah.
That's trying to follow your party, and you capture them in the snare trap. Yeah. It's silly, and it's niche, and it's fun.
It's probably borderline D tier.
It's
if we're being honest with ourselves, like the only circumstance where this spell helps you is like when you have the ability to prepare an ambush, which I guess is cool. Actually, in that respect, like, you know, if you've got an ambush and someone's really gonna run into that spot, like it's kind of like a low-level magic circle.
How long is a long rest?
A long rest is 8 hours.
Okay. I was trying to think of a way that you could cast this multiple times all around, like surrounding your camp, and then go to take your long rest. And then if somebody springs
it's one of the. It's like this is one of the first spells in the game, like Magic Circle and Glyph of Warding, where like you can try to prepare an environment for an enemy coming into it, and in those circumstances, this spell might be used. It's a very small area.
You know, my rogue helps out in our campsite by putting string and bells around. I mean, that doesn't require a spell slot.
Well, that's why the alarm spell is a ritual.
And the alarm spell is a ritual, and no, it won't hoist your enemy up in the air, but they also get to save every single turn.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to break out of.
They can decipher the illusion with an Arcana check, and
it's like a C minus.
I'm going to give it a C.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree it's a C minus. But at the same time, I like that this spell exists, and thank you for making it.
But now we come to the best spell in the entire game. Speak with Animals, a divination spell for bards, druids, rangers, nature domain clerics, and Oath of the Ancient Paladins. It's a one-action ritual to cast with a duration of 10 minutes, and you get the ability to speak with cats, dogs, and other beasts for the duration. And I love this spell so much so because of Baldur's Gate 3. And I love talking to all the cats in the game. They have interesting things to say. I am their mother, me mama. And I just want to take all the animals home and speak with them and hang out. Their cats are more interesting than people in many cases, so I want this spell.
Baldur's Gate 3 showed me how fun this spell can be, but I also think Baldur's Gate 3 should be a lesson to DMs on if one of your players takes Speak with Animals, come up with personalities for your animals.
Yes.
One of my favorite moments, and I won't use Baldur's Gate 3, but like one of my favorite moments was when we decided to cast Speak with Animals on a regular rat in our campaign. And we were like, "Hey rat, what have you seen?" And the rat's like, "I'll kill you." And you just went like, it was like the most angry and aggressive rat, and I think that's the same rat that ended up attacking me and doing damage, and I couldn't like but it was just such a fun little surprise to be like, "Hey rat, have you seen where the enemy?" And the rat was just like, "I will kill you, get out of my home, give me cheese or die." And like just having those fun moments where like, first you get to think like an animal as a DM. You get to be like, what would the squirrel know? And the squirrel might, like, a lot of people expect to use the spell and be like, "Hey squirrel, which way did the king of the city go?" And the squirrel doesn't know who the king of the city is. The squirrel's just like, "Do you have nuts? Yes or no? Yes, people came by here, give me nuts and I'll tell you which way they went." You need to like decide, what does the animal want? What does it know? And you might need to think of that basic information.
You need to make it. I think it's hard because it's oftentimes the DM isn't prepared to make an NPC out of just the random cat, rat, or dog or squirrel that is there. So oftentimes the spell kind of falls flat because the DM has had to make that NPC up on the spot. But as someone who's had to make a lot of NPCs on the spot, often the ones that are made up on the spot are the most memorable ones that your players fall in love with. And because it's an animal, now it's even more memorable. So for me, because the spell creates those situations when players use it, it's an S tier spell for that alone. In terms of information gathering and in terms of investigation, it is a highly underrated spell for finding out facts about the environment in unexpected ways. And I do think that this is one of those divination spells that it's worthwhile, like putting a post-it note on your DM screen or just remembering when you're creating an adventure site, what do the animals have to say? Because any player that is casting the spell is excited to use it. They want to know what the animals know. And so I think that this is one of those spells that DMs, you should make this spell S tier in your campaign because it's cool, it's creative, it facilitates an interesting role-playing moment. It allows the players to engage with the world and the setting. It shows that they're thinking of the problems. And it comes through the lens of a fun role-playing interaction. So you want the recipe for like just everything that makes a spell great. This is it.
I personally think that it is an A tier spell.
Okay.
I'm sorry to break your heart. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I just do think that its mileage does vary based on oftentimes animals aren't going to have the specifics of the information you're looking for. They don't know who people are. They don't necessarily know anything about the political intrigue of your campaign. They're not going to know anything about the state of the world from a human viewpoint. What they will know is the state of the world from a environmental standpoint. What they are really useful for is there is no way that the squirrels and birds and deer and whatnot of the forest are not aware that a group of people have taken over the old fort that used to be their home and refurbished it, and now there's humans building machine things in their forest. If you are trying to find or locate a hidden base or camp of your enemies in the forest, I think that 100% the animals of the forest know where it is because they would notice a disruption in their woods.
You are completely correct. There's a limit to what animals can know. And I think that that is commensurate with the cost of this spell as a ritual and as a first level ritual at that.
Fair.
Right? So considering that it is only a first level spell as a ritual that costs you nothing to cast, it's amazing that you can get that from this spell, right? It sets up so much and asks for so little, except for your creativity.
You know, I've said this, I haven't said this, but I've graded earlier in this series because a ritual spell doesn't actually cost a spell slot. You can cast it for free. It immediately raises it up a bar. So, You know what? Sure, let's give it S. It's super fun. And I think that DMs should work harder on making this spell as fun as it is in Baldur's Gate 3. Next up, we do come to Tasha's Hideous Laughter, an enchantment spell for bards, wizards, and Great Old One warlocks. It has a casting time of 1 action and a duration of 1 minute and requires concentration. A creature of your choice that you can see within a 30-foot range perceives everything as hilariously funny and basically bursts out laughing. They have to make a wisdom saving throw or they fall prone laughing uncontrollably. A creature with an intelligence score of 4 or less, though, isn't affected. At the end of each of its turns, and each time it takes damage, it gets to take another wisdom saving throw. And the target has advantage on the saving throw if it's triggered by damage. On a success, the spell ends.
For a first level spell slot, you incapacitate, knock prone, and effectively incapacitate and immobilize a creature for a minute.
I think that this spell is great. It has a similar problem in my books to sleep, but not nearly as severe. And what I mean by that is sleep falls off the radar very, very, very quickly. This one stays around a little bit longer and can still be useful, but I do find that as we get access to higher level spells, this one becomes less and less what I'm going to use my first level spell slots on, and I would trade it out. And for that reason, I don't think I could give it an S, but I do think that it's quite a potent spell at early levels and stays useful for a time.
It takes a single enemy out of the fight, and it is part of the continuum of Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, Hold Monster, but also fits in the realm of spells like Banishment and otherwise. The really nice thing about Tasha's Hideous Laughter is that, like all of its cousins, it creates advantage because the targets have advantage on attack rolls. And even if the target fails its initial saving throw, they fall prone, and the fighter comes over to them, hits them once with advantage, and the target's still prone. They still have to get up from prone, and so other characters can take advantage of that. And so just on the element of like knocking someone prone for a first level spell slot, actually pretty good. Just on that alone. But then the fact that you can also use it in a way that they're incapacitated and don't get their turn, it's not as effective at like as Hold Person as that, okay, everybody come and crit this guy. Sort of thing. The interesting thing about Tasha's Hideous Laughter is that it's not restricted on creature type the way Hold Person is. It's restricted based on intelligence. So you can affect a much wider range than Hold Person can. And so you always have this, I feel like the choice of Hold Person or Tasha's Hideous Laughter is actually, they really do compete with each other. And I'm not sure which one is better.
I still think Hold Person is better.
Okay.
I think that this is an A tier spell. I think that I can't give it an S tier because every time that I've had Tasha's Hideous Laughter, I stop using it as soon as I get access to Hold Person, Hold Monster.
I think that's fair. So should it really be a B?
I mean, maybe, but I still think it's one of your... you should consider picking this spell up if you have access to it at the early levels of play. It's tough. Again, you did mention that it might be competing with those other spells, so I think you might be using this into 5th and 6th level. 7th level. Like for a large portion of your campaign, if you're starting at level 1, this could be a useful spell.
Yeah, it's just one of those kind of circumstances too, where like maybe Tasha's Hideous Laughter for a first level spell slot does the job of a 5th level spell. Like if you want to like, one of the things that I always think about with the spell is like, should I just use Hideous Laughter or Banishment if I just want to take someone out of the fight for a couple turns? Like, what is the better choice? And it could potentially do it. Like if you don't touch them, they do get a save every round, but they're still there laughing.
Yeah, but you know, Banishment makes it so you don't have to listen to their annoying laughter for like an hour.
Yeah, it's true, and it works. Yeah, it's clear to save. Unequivocally, but it's again, it's only asking you for a first level spell, so that's kind of why I always consider like. I'm like, unlike many other spells, I don't want to give this like say it's trash. Just take another spell because it does work. It does do the job.
It does it well, which is why I think A tier.
Yeah, Tasha's brewing up even more spells for us with Tasha's Caustic Brew, an evocation spell for sorcerers, wizards, and artificers. Also a casting time of 1 action. It has a duration of 1 minute. You do have to concentrate on it too. And you send a stream of acid out from you in a line 30 feet long and 5 feet wide in a direction you choose. Everyone makes a dex save or they're coated in sticky acid until they scrape it off or wash it off. They take 2d4 acid damage at the start of each of their turns while they're coated in this acid, and you can upcast it to do more damage.
I think this is a perfectly good damage dealing spell.
I agree. It's like you can hit a bunch of targets.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything to get the damage later. It just stays.
Yeah. I do think that one thing that's tricky with spells like this, and even Lightning Bolt, these are both spells that are great, but one thing that's tricky is finding the line. Because I'm always looking for the line that's more than 2 enemies.
You're always trying to go right up to the line, but not crossing over.
Yeah. And so lining's hard than an AoE of just like splash damage, but it still is capable of hitting multiple targets, and it still is able to coat them all and do repeating damage.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is that they can automatically get out of it by spending an action, but then they had to spend an action.
So you are doing damage or costing all of the creatures you hit a turn.
Yeah.
It's basically like a lose a turn or get damaged spell.
I like it. I like it a lot, and it does respectable damage for concentration, especially if you manage to hit at least 2 enemies for a first level spell. I think, once again, because it's a concentration spell, this is probably also the problem with Tasha's other spell, is that it always has that question of what are you concentrating on? And I think that the whole thing is, I'm not concentrating on a first level spell past when I have other higher level spells available to me.
So I do want to give this one a B.
Yeah, I think
it's perfectly respectable. Great at low levels. Is it the spell you want to be concentrating on? You have to make that decision in the moment. There might be better spells to concentrate on, but this is a respectful damage-dealing concentration spell. Tensor's Floating Disc is a conjuration spell available for wizards. It has a casting time of 1 action. It can be a ritual spell. And a duration of 1 hour. You create a circular horizontal plane of force, 3 feet in diameter, 1 inch thick, floats 3 feet above the ground, and occupies an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within range. For the duration, it can hold up to 500 pounds, and when the spell ends, anything that was on the disc just falls to the ground. The disc follows you around, and it moves up and down stairs, or if you're even like climbing a mountain or anything, it will literally just move with you. If you move more than 100 feet from the disc, typically this would happen if it can't follow you around because of obstacles or a door gets closed between you and the disc, then the spell ends.
Okay, I have a single question that's going to influence my ranking. Can you ride the disc? Can you scoot around on the disc?
So here's the thing. The spell description states that the spell is immobile, but it follows you. The disc is immobile while you are within 20 feet of it. If you move more than 20 feet away from it, the disc follows you. So no, you can't ride it. Because if you hop up on it, you're not moving, and therefore the disc just stays there. It's a nice seat, though. You always have a functioning seat. You can, like, move and then go back and be like, I'm going to sit here for a while. Chill.
I mean, it's basically a disc that carries your stuff.
So
It's great for looting the dungeon.
this is the thing. I don't think this is the most useful spell in the game. In our campaign, though, we recently were like, how are we going to get all this stuff out of this dungeon? And I didn't say it during the stream, but this spell popped into my head, and I was like, man, I wish somebody had a floating disc right now to pile 500 pound of treasure on, and then just move it out of the dungeon.
Honestly, the other thing that I wonder about the spell is, like, does it float over water?
Yeah.
So I feel like it has... So you can't ride the disc.
But somebody else could.
Because somebody else can.
So this is the thing. Okay. You're about to climb a mountain. You cast some spell on yourself that makes you better at climbing, because usually spellcasters aren't going to be good at climbing. The other spellcaster who sucks at climbing climbs on your disc.
But the disc can't go up more than 10 feet in elevation.
Oh, so it needs to be a slope.
It needs to be a slope.
It can't be
Can you go tobogganing with the floating disc?
Somebody else can.
Okay. What if I have two wizards and both of us make floating discs and we both are on each other's floating discs? What happens?
You're going to have to do some sort of weird propel one of you first. You're going to have to physics this. I'm sure there's a physics equation here that can get both discs moving at the same time so that you can ride them down a mountain. So, sure.
S tier.
I give this a C tier.
I mean, it's still just a ritual. It's a niche ritual. So
it's a niche ritual.
Yeah,
If you have the availability to add it to your ritual spells, do so. Maybe that makes it a B tier that it's a ritual.
You know what negates this spell for a lot of parties? A bag of holding.
Yeah. So no, I'm sticking with C.
Okay.
Because a bag of holding, a portable hole,
I want my floating disc toboggan.
unseen servant. Can I have an unseen servant riding a floating disc?
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay. Well, next up we come to Thunderous Smite. This evocation spell is for paladins. It has a casting time of 1 bonus action and a duration of 1 minute. It requires concentration. And the first time you hit with a melee weapon attack during the spell's duration, your weapon rings with thunder that is audible for 300 feet, and you deal an extra 2d6 thunder damage to the target. Additionally, if the target is a creature, it must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pushed 10 feet away from you and knocked prone.
I think that this is the A tier smite.
Yeah, absolutely. We've comparing it to the other smite that we looked at. This one is way better. I only have one gripe with it. That makes it not S tier. You don't always want to be heard from 300 feet out.
My gripe is that you still have to concentrate on it, and I really wish that you could stack it with other stuff. Like,
You can stack it with a regular smite.
you actually can, and that's cool. Especially when you stack the regular smite with Thunder Smite, and you use it to defenestrate the demon out the window, and it falls onto spikes and dies.
Yeah, that rare occasion where that happens, do it.
I mean, that's overkill, but paladins are all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think that this spell is one of the better... I mean, all of the smite spells require concentration because there is a pro and a con there. We have to be concentrating on a spell, but as a paladin... Well, no, I'm probably concentrating on Bless, which is the hard part.
This is the hard part about this spell specifically, because the only reason why you concentrate on Thunder Smite is that when you cast it, it's got this weird timing issue. Like, if Thunder Smite was written maybe now, it would be an action to cast, and it would be kind of written like...
The next time you hit with an attack.
The attack would be part of the spell.
Right.
Right?
But I also I like that the concentration makes it so that if you miss,
you can try
still get
again.
it. But that's why I don't think it needs concentration. I wish the spell was just when you cast the spell, the next time you hit with a melee weapon attack, it does this.
See, there's so many things. This is another example of one of those spells that this spell is pretty much a 4th edition expat, right? Like, and in 4th edition, they would have just said that this power had the reliable keyword. So if it wasn't so if you missed, it wasn't expended, right? Like there were so many other ways that they could have implemented this spell that didn't require the clunky concentration part of it.
Because it's concentration, does that make it a B?
I feel like it almost does.
Because
it's a really big knock against it.
it's really hard to say I'm going to cast Thunderous Smite when I could be blessing 3 of my allies, or 2 allies and myself.
Yes.
Which is going to get me a lot more.
It's cool to bring on your paladin because sometimes here's the reason why it's worth bringing and packing, because sometimes you do want to push someone out a window.
And sometimes the wizard has an AoE spell in effect that you really want to knock targets into.
And so just having something in your back pocket that you can do to do 10 feet of forced movement as a paladin is just a really useful thing to have in your arsenal. And if you have to give up your concentration to do it, that's great. That almost pushes it into the niche tier, but I think that it's easy enough for, like, most paladins that I played have always been able to prepare this spell somewhere. And even if you prepare it and never cast it, like, it's no skin off your back.
So we said A originally, but I think because it's a concentration spell and it's competing with your other paladin concentration
downgrade
spells,
to B.
I think B.
Yeah. So the cousin to Thunder Smite is Thunderwave, an evocation spell for bards, druids, sorcerers, wizards, Tempest Domain, the Genie warlocks, the Fathomless warlocks, artillerists, and armorers. 1 action to cast. Wave of Thunderous Force sweeps out from you. Every creature in a 15-foot cone, actually cube, it's not a cone, has to make a con save. On a failed save, 2d8 thunder damage, and they're pushed 10 feet away from you. So this is Thunder Smite, but an AoE, which they're really... I love this spell. I really like it. It's an easy staple for that forced movement effect that can affect multiple enemies, push them off a cliff, push them into an AoE, push them into the fighter, push them wherever they need to go. That makes it, for me, it's like a B plus, A minus.
I'm giving it an A.
Okay. I won't argue that.
We're kind of broken records on this. Baldur's Gate 3. I used Thunderous Smite. My bard had Thunderous Smite. And I used it so much. While the warlock was busy Eldritch blasting people off of cliffs, I was Thunderous Smite, sorry, Thunderwave. I was Thunderwaving enemies off of cliffs.
How long until Roland shows off his Thunderwave? Sorry, that voice from that camp, that voice line from the camp just it gets me. It's like it smells worse over here than a dozen eggs dropped in a vat of vinegar. Larian just loves having that NPC repeat the same voice line in town over and over again.
Mine is, I have a lot going on, I have a lot on my mind and in it.
Yeah. These boots have seen everything.
Yes. Those lines are going to stay with us forever. But, getting back on track, Thunderwave is just, I think knocking creatures around is great. Doing damage on top of knocking creatures around is even better.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with this spell. There's no reason why you shouldn't be looking at it if it's available to you.
I think the only things that kind of work against it is that it is you have to be right up to the targets, and it is a constitution.
Well, 15 feet.
Yeah, 15 feet, but it's still pretty close range. And the con save is oftentimes you want to push the big meaty thing that's going to make that save very easily. Whereas sometimes, the telekinetic feat really kind of stomps on this in a lot of ways, but
15 feet does give you enough room to put an ally not between you and the spell. Like, you don't want to hit your
You're
ally.
not going to be in immediate melee range.
Yeah. So there's some tactful ways to use this to your benefit, and I think it's great.
Yeah, it's enough that actually if you have enough movement, you can walk up to somebody, Thunderwave them, and walk back, and they're probably not going to be able to run up to you next turn. But I think that this is the other key thing with Thunderwave. It's like you do have to be using it to push somebody into something.
Well, this is also,
or off something.
As a spellcaster, you drop your concentration AoE damage dealing stays in effect spell, and then you stand a little ways from the edge of it, and when a group of enemies come out, you thunderwave them back in.
It's just such solid utility for that respect. I like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next up, we come to Unseen Servant, a conjuration spell available for bards, warlocks, and wizards. It has a casting time of 1 action. It can be taken as a ritual spell, and it has a duration of 1 hour. It creates an invisible, mindless, shapeless medium force that performs simple tasks at your command until the spell ends. So if you need a friend, you can make a friend. It has an AC of 10, 1 hit point, a strength of 2. It can't attack. If it drops to 0 hit points, the spell ends. Once on each of your turns as a bonus action, you can command the servant to move up to 15 feet and interact with an object, or do all sorts of things. Fetching, cleaning, mending, fold your clothes, do your laundry, have tea with you, give you a back massage.
Does the back massage count as grappling? Because if it is, then it's an attack, and the Unseen Servant can't attack.
Don't take my massage away. This is my personal masseuse.
It only has a strength of 2. Like, it can't really give you a very forceful massage. Like, it can't really, get in there at all. Like, it's not strong enough to, really go for it.
Yeah.
It's just very gentle. It's like a light breeze gently caressing your back.
Well,
can it do your hair? Can an Unseen Servant give you a haircut?
If I had an Unseen Servant, I would train it in all of those menial tasks. I would make it read barber shop books on how to be a proper barber. What if your Unseen Servant turns on you?
It can't. It's just a mindless force. It doesn't even have a body. It's literally just
in that
a
way,
thing that manipulates stuff.
It makes really good company. It always listens to me. It never interrupts. It's my best friend. S tier friend.
Okay, so in reality, Unseen Servant is actually a really useful spell. As a ritual, it can manipulate a surprising amount of things, and better the Unseen Servant press that button than you.
True, and it can walk through traps. You can kind of use it as a crash test dummy.
You kind of can. Hey, what about that scary book over there? Who's gonna lift that scary book off the pedestal? Not me. I got an Unseen Servant to do that for us.
Who's going to test to see if this pool of lava is actually an illusion that heads down into the secret layer of the big bad evil guy?
The Unseen Servant might not be able to do that though, because it is unseen. Although you'd know if it was destroyed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it just walks into the lava, and if you hear sizzling, then that don't go
what
in the lava.
What exactly is sizzling?
the illusion.
Yeah. Also, it's kind of cool because you can command it as a bonus action in combat. And so the Unseen Servant can do all these weird environmental interactions for you in combat.
If you have a lever in a room that triggers a pit trap.
Yeah.
You can just have the Unseen Servant standing there, and you can try to shove your enemy onto the pit trap and have the Unseen Servant as a bonus action pull the lever.
Yeah.
Wrong lever.
I actually think it's an A tier spell.
Considering it's a ritual, again, rituals, it's almost like concentrations get a bump down and rituals get a bump up.
Yeah.
I'll give it an A. It's a ritual spell, meaning you can take it, it can be really, really useful, and it doesn't cost you a spell slot. If you don't have ritual spell casting, it might be a B.
Are you ready for the best spell in the game?
Yes.
Witch Bolt. An evocation spell for sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards with a casting time of 1 action, a duration of 1 minute that requires concentration. With Witch Bolt, you send out a Emperor Palpatine style lightning against a creature within 30 feet of you, forming a sustained arc. You make a ranged spell attack to hit. On a hit, d12 lightning damage, and then afterwards, you can use an action on each of your turns until the spell ends to do that d12 automatically. The spell ends if you stop concentrating on the spell, if you don't use your action to keep the link going, or if the target or you move more than 30 feet apart.
No, you will die.
I mean, the spell has such cool vibes, despite being really, really bad. Why is it bad?
I hate that this spell stops working if the enemy leaves the range of 30 feet.
So that's the first thing, is that an enemy can just be like, yeah, nope.
Oh, I'm getting electrocuted, and they move their move distance away from you.
And then it's just over.
And the spell ends.
The second thing is that not only do you have to continue concentrating on the spell and stay close to the target, which means that they could also just walk up to you, punch you in the face, and break your concentration, you also have to expend your action every turn to do that extra d12. That means that you don't get the damage from the spell in addition to whatever else you're doing. Here's a great comparison. Tasha's Caustic Brew. Tasha's Caustic Brew, if you had cast it instead of Witch Bolt, Tasha's Caustic Brew had the same range. It was a dexterity save versus an attack roll, which either or. Both require concentration. Tasha's Caustic Brew, though, you could have got 2 targets who are now taking a 2d4 each.
Unless they use an action.
Unless they use an action to get out of it. And then on your turn, instead of having to spend that action to get that extra damage, you could just huck a cantrip.
I do think that...
And you can move away from the Caustic Brew target. Like, you can run up, hit someone 30 feet away from you, then play keep away with, like, whatever spell you want to use, like Ray of Frost afterwards. And that's going to be... And Caustic Brew plus cantrips is probably going to outperform Witch Bolt.
Now, I don't think that Witch Bolt is utter trash. I actually do think that there is value in using one spell slot to get multiple rounds of 1d12 damage. But you need to be aware, are you in a room that is smaller than where the enemies can't get 30 feet away from you? This does have potential, and not great potential, but I personally want to give it a C, not a D. I think that there are niche cases where the spell, for the cost of 1 first level spell slot, which you yourself have said is not a high cost, you can get 2, 3, 4 rounds of 1d12 damage. That adds up for the cost of 1 spell slot.
I just feel that Caustic Brew completely outpaces it.
I mean, it does less damage, and an attack roll, you have also stated, is often better than a saving throw.
It does less damage for the cost of the spell, but not for the cost of the actions. The reason why I like Caustic Brew better is because instead of using my action to do 1d12 damage on subsequent turns, I'm going to get that 2d4 extra damage automatically, and unless the enemy gets out of it, which
we gave Caustic Brew
a B. I'm going to hit them with Firebolt for a d10. So now I'm doing d10 plus 2d4 and potentially affecting more than one target.
I'm technically agreeing with you because I'm going to give this a C. So I do think Caustic Brew is the better spell. I just don't think, like, if you took Witch Bolt, you might have fun with Witch Bolt. But I think that people take Witch Bolt unaware of those little caveats that stack up.
Well, the other thing as well is that when you upcast Witch Bolt, the subsequent round damage doesn't boost up either.
And that is, okay, C minus. I'm still going to stick with a C. But it's not a great spell.
There's one use for it.
Because you want to be the Emperor.
If you're a Tempest Domain Cleric with your Channel Divinity power to max the damage out, in that case, if you use a 9th level spell slot to cast Witch Bolt and your Channel Divinity power, it does 108 damage.
Cool. Witch Bolt, worth it. Also, just for the record, Emperor Palpatine uses Witch Bolt constantly, and it also is the spell that killed him in almost every time that he's died, which is oddly multiple times. But he kills himself with his own Witch Bolt.
Force Lightning. We like the spell in concept. It just needs it could be a higher level spell that actually like incapacitates the target, because Force Lightning in Star Wars actually causes such a huge amounts of pain that the target is effectively incapacitated.
Which would be awesome.
Yeah.
And you can see their skeleton, and it's cool. Be careful with this spell.
Yeah, for me it's a D.
Okay.
Wrathful Smite is a evocation spell for paladins and hexblades. like the other Smite spells, bonus action to cast, concentration 1 minute. Next time you hit with the melee attack, this one is 1d6 psychic damage. And in addition, the target has to make a wisdom save or be scared of you, frightened, until the spell ends. As an action, the creature can repeat the save by stealing itself to try to break out of the frightened effect. Again, I mean, I think that this spell potentially has some value for Conquest Paladins.
Definitely, because Conquest Paladins play into the fear factor.
Yes.
Frightened is a great condition to
And
have on a
they
Conquest
want
Paladin.
to inflict it. So that is the only case that I would see using it. Beyond that, it's a C. Borderline D.
I'll give it a C. I think that, first of all, psychic damage, not resisted by barely anybody. Second of all,
Frightened's not a bad condition. It's disadvantage on attack rolls. They can't walk up to you. Like, it's decent.
they do have to use their action to make a saving throw against.
Yes.
It's not, they don't get to make it every turn. It's they're using their action to make that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the action denial can be pretty good.
So they're frightened until they spend an action to try to unfrighten themselves, which, again, like Tasha's Caustic Brew, they have to give it. They're not taking additional damage, but the frightened condition is good.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to give it a B. You know?
Okay. You convinced me. B it is. Wrathful Smite, not bad.
The ranger at our table made this spell famous. Zephyr Strike is a transmutation spell for rangers that has a casting time of 1 bonus action, a duration of 1 minute. It requires concentration. You move like the wind. Until the spell ends, your movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. But additionally, once before the spell ends, you give yourself advantage on 1 weapon attack roll on your turn. That attack deals an extra 1d8 force damage on a hit. Whether you hit or miss, your walking speed increases by 30 feet until the end of that turn. I didn't think much of this spell at first. It does a whole bunch of things, all of them kind of small, all of them kind of useful. But Jill, who plays a ranger, a Gloomstalker ranger at our table, uses it to great effect. Jill's character and most rangers who are ranged combatants do not like being surrounded or in melee combat.
Yep.
So the fact that you get to get out of melee combat, get yourself to a more advantageous position. With her Tabaxi Gloomstalker, she has a climbing speed. So she will literally move away from enemies.
And she has feline agility.
And feline agility. So she will move away from enemies who are trying to surround her, get to the top of a tower, snipe them with advantage for 1d8 extra damage. Properly used, this is actually an excellent spell.
I agree. I actually do think that this and Hunter's Mark are my top picks for most rangers, and I think that for in a lot of cases, the utility that this spell brings, it's hard to like be like, oh, this is not a lot of extra damage. This is not an extra thing. It just brings so much utility, right? Because even when you use the bonus effect from Zephyr Strike, the spell is still in effect and you don't provoke opportunity attacks. That alone is kind of worth it.
Yeah.
Just for a first level spell slot to have your movement not provoking opportunity attacks as an archer or as a skirmisher type character, the spell would be an A tier spell for that alone. But then the fact that the spell also gives you this extra little benefit of the extra D8 damage plus the advantage plus the 30-foot move boost once during its duration, that's great. I think sometimes Jill will cast the spell again when it's already in effect just to get the advantage, the extra D8, and the extra 30 feet of movement so that she can zip somewhere else again. I don't always think that that's the best, or that's not always the most efficient use of resources, but every time she's done it, it's mattered.
Yeah. And she is kind of that case for, it doesn't matter if she's using it the most efficiently, she's still using it well, and it matters. Yeah. And like the fact that she's a Gloomstalker, she's just dealing, people always ask, how is she doing so much damage on the first round of combat? Well, she's a Gloomstalker, she also has rogue levels, and she's using Zephyr Strike.
And that's the other thing that really gives her a big advantage with this as well, is because because for her, it's a bonus action way of getting a bunch of things all at once.
Because she's also triggering her sneak attack.
Yes, and because she needs to move out of melee range to not have disadvantage on the ranged attack roll. Like there's just so many moving pieces that actually add up to. I think it's an absolute A+ spell for Ranger.
I think that if you are playing Jill's specific build, which is the Ranger Rogue multi-class, Gloomstalker Ranger, Arcane Trickster Rogue, you take Zephyr Strike, I think then it might be the best choice, might be an S tier, because it's allowing you to trigger your sneak attack, it's allowing you to move away from enemies, it's allowing you to do additional damage on top of your sneak attack. If you want to nuke an enemy on your first round of combat, this will help you do that. And so I think Jill is the most effective use case for it. But if you're not doing the multi-class, it isn't helping with your sneak attack, therefore maybe you're not playing the exact build that she is, then I think A is the safe place.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to even compare it against one of the things that Jill does with it, because she is a Ranger Rogue, is now that her movement doesn't cost opportunity attacks, she can use her bonus action. She doesn't need to use her bonus action to disengage. So she can use her bonus action to dash at the same time. Or she can use her bonus action to make more attacks or whatever she needs to do depending on her weapon or loadout. It's really interesting. I think it's an excellent spell. And it flew under my radar until I have seen it used so effectively in a campaign.
Same. That wraps up first level spells. We did it. Five episodes?
Only took us 5 episodes. Guess what?
There are more second level spells than there are first level spells. So thank you for joining us on this ride. It's only just begun. Technically, we can package this up and say first level spells done, wrap a bow on it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how far we get before one D&D comes out.
Yeah, we're going to try to get this all done before the new iteration of D&D comes out, and then, hey, maybe we'll just do it all over again.
Yeah, we'll see what actually changes. Yeah, this has been a really fun process to look back at all of the spells, and, well, I think that on we could have ranked some of them differently, and there's definitely circumstances where a niche spell works really, really well, or a great spell is not maybe the best pick.
All in all, though, I think it was just a blast discussing spells with you.
Yeah.
We
only disagreed sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, this is what got us to do this channel in the first place, was you and I sitting in our break room discussing what spells were cool and what feats were cool and all of that. So that's why we love doing these tier ranking videos. Tell us about your opinions and your favorite first level spells in the comments below.
The videos that we make on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon community. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider becoming a patron by following the links right down below.
And if you want to see some of these amazing spells in use, including Zephyr Strike, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we got plenty more tier ranking and spell content right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.